Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're exploring something really quite paradoxical. It's the story of this figure revered by millions, across huge regions, but whose life, at least according to the specific sources we've got, well, it wasn't exactly successful in the way we might think. Filled with constant challenges, yet he's held up as this example for all of humanity. So we're going to do a deep dive into the life of Krishna, not just the mythology, but looking at him almost like a historical person based on this fascinating, really detailed set of source notes we received. Our goal here is to pull out the key takeaways, the insights from these specific records.
Exactly. And our mission really is to unpack these particular sources. We want to follow the timeline, look at the personal struggles he faced, the really pivotal moments in his journey, and, the deeper lessons embedded in this unique life story. We're trying to understand what makes this figure stand out, especially when you look through the lens of these notes, which kind of challenge our usual ideas about success.
And you'll see just how precise these sources are right from the start. It's pretty remarkable. Our notes dive straight into Krishna's birth with, well, astonishing detail. They say he was born exactly 500 and 252 years ago, July 18th, 228 BC. Can you imagine? They even pinpoint it was a Wednesday in Mathura, month of Shravan, on Ashtami Rohini Nakshatra, and exactly at midnight, 000 a.m.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that level of detail down to the minute, it just highlights how meticulous these notes are. Like they're documenting a real historical event, from his very first breath.
It's fascinating. But despite that precision at the beginning, his life, as these sources lay it out, was marked by really tough origins. They detail his biological parents, Vasudeva and Devaki, but he was adopted, raised by Nanda and Yashoda. And the notes explicitly state his life was not fair to him at all. They even point out his mother was from the Ugra clan, his father from the Yadava clan, different lineages. The sources call it an inter-clan marriage for that time, which suggests, potential social hurdles right there.
And this is where his personal story, as these notes describe it, it gets really poignant. The struggles they highlight are quite striking. Born dark-skinned. Apparently, he was never formally named his whole life. Instead, the village just started calling him Kanha, which means the black one.
Mm-hmm.
He was apparently ridiculed, teased for being black, short, and adopted. Just imagine dealing with that as a kid, being called the black one, just because of how you looked. It paints such a human picture, doesn't it? Very different from the sort of purely divine image. And on top of that, his childhood was apparently wrought with life-threatening situations.
Absolutely. The notes are very clear about these early, really personal challenges. It suggests that his later strength, his resilience, it wasn't from an easy life. It was forged in, constant difficulty. And this difficulty continued with migrations early on. Our sources say when he was just 9, there was a drought and also the threat of wild wolves. It forced his whole community to move from Gokul to Vrindavan. And he only stayed in Vrindavan until he was 10 years and 8 months old.
And right then, at 10 years and 8 months, he faced his first huge conflict. The sources state he killed his own maternal uncle, Kansa, in Mathura. Apparently, Kansa was a tyrant. And after that, he freed his biological parents. But what's really striking is the note says he never returned to Vrindavan ever again. Left behind the only real home he'd known as a child.
Yeah, that's a big shift. And after that, his journey involved even more forced migration. He had to leave Mathura, move all the way to Dwarka. This was because of a threat from a Sindhu king, Kalyavana. And the sources explain how he then, quite strategically, defeated another powerful king, Jarasandha. He got help from the Vainatheya tribes on Gomantaka Hill, which, the notes say, is now Goa. And after securing the place, he rebuilt Dwarka, basically founded this new city on the coast.
So after childhood just packed with being forced to move, personal insults, fighting powerful enemies, he finally turns to education. Our sources note he went off to Sandipani's ashram in Ujjain. Started his schooling somewhere between 16 and 18 years old.
Yeah, it's quite a detail, isn't it? That despite all that early chaos, learning was still, a focus.
It is.
And what's really remarkable about this time, there's this anecdote in the sources about his schooling. He actually had to go fight pirates from Africa. That's the term used in these notes. To rescue his teacher's son, Kunardatta. Apparently, the son was kidnapped near Prabhasa, which was a seaport in Gujarat.
Pirates from Africa during his schooling.
That's what the source says. It paints this picture of a surprisingly connected world even back then, but also a dangerous one. Shows him immediately putting his skills, his strength, his strategy into practice, even when he was supposed to be studying.
Okay, so his life's already been incredibly eventful. Forced moves, ridicule, fighting pirates while at school. And now the sources bring us to what's arguably his biggest, definitely most challenging role. The Kurukshetra War. The Mega War, as they call it. And get this, he was apparently 89 years old when this massive conflict started. The dates are, again, incredibly specific. Started December 8th, 339 BC. That was Megashira Shukla Ekadashi. And it ended just over 2 weeks later, December 25th, 339 BC. So what do these sources tell us about how he handled this ultimate challenge?
Well, this is where the sources give a really interesting angle. His involvement was huge, obviously. They state he rescued his cousins from the infamous wax house.
Right, that assassination attempt.
Exactly. A lethal trap described in the records. And later, he helped them set up their capital, Indraprastha, build their kingdom. Beyond that, he saved Draupadi from embarrassment, stepping in during that moment of public humiliation. He stood by his cousins during their exile, offering constant support, strategic advice, and ultimately he stood by them and made them win the Kurukshetra War.
But the way it's described, he's less of a frontline warrior himself and more the master strategist, the guide, the one orchestrating their win through, well, wisdom and dedication, not really divine power or just brute force.
And again, the sources throw in these really specific details from the war itself. They mention a solar eclipse happened between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. on 21st December 3139 BC. And this eclipse is cited as the direct cause of Jayadratha's death, the key enemy warrior. These kinds of detailed astronomical notes woven into the story are pretty amazing. Oh, and they also give a specific date for Bhishma's death, another major figure, February 2nd, 3138 BC. It's quite telling, isn't it? Especially when you consider this next point from the sources. For someone right at the heart of this massive epic war, our sources explicitly state he's only recorded as having killed 4 people in his entire life. Janura the wrestler, Kansa his uncle, and then his cousins Shishupala and Dentavakra.
Only 4 in his whole life, including that war.
That's what these specific notes claim. It's unusual, right? It really points toward his influence being more strategic, more guiding, rather than overtly violent, a very distinct portrayal.
That is unusual. And speaking of unusual details, the sources then describe the end of his life, which was incredibly long, but like the beginning, it was marked by hardship. He lived 125 years, 8 months, and 7 days. Died on February 18th, 3102 BC, which was 36 years after the Kurukshetra War ended. And before he died, he saw his own cherished city, Dwaraka, washed away. Just imagine that loss.
A heartbreaking end to his city-building efforts.
Absolutely. And then he was killed by a hunter named Jara in a forest nearby. It seems like such a, well, simple, unassuming end for such a monumental figure.
And this leads to some of the most provocative claims in these sources about his life overall. They flat out assert he never did any miracles.
No miracles.
None, according to these notes. And maybe even more startling, his life was not a successful one. And they really emphasize this point. There was not a single moment when he was at peace throughout his life. At every turn, he had challenges, and even more bigger challenges. It really forces you to reconsider what success even means in his story, doesn't it? Completely challenges the common view.
Wow. Okay, so given this whole journey described in the notes, constant challenges, immense responsibility, but also this detachment, how do we square that with the sources saying his life was not successful, yet he had such a massive impact?
That's the absolute core of the paradox these notes present, I think. They deliberately strip away the miraculous, the easy divinity. They force us to see his impact through his human struggles, through his unwavering commitment to responsibility, even when things were, frankly, unfair. It's almost like the sources are arguing his real power wasn't in magic, but in how he handled a life that constantly threw curveballs at him. And despite all that struggle, the notes highlight this key idea. He faced everything and everyone with a sense of responsibility and yet remained unattached. That internal balance that's presented as central to who he was.
That combination, responsibility and detachment, especially if you knew the future, as the sources suggest. That's quite something.
It really is. And what's truly illuminating is how this connects to his unique wisdom. The sources state he is the only person who knew the past and future, yet he lived at that present moment always.
Okay, pause on that. He knew the past and the future.
According to these notes, yes. Think about that for a second. To have that ultimate foresight, to know what's coming, good and bad, yet to remain completely grounded, fully present, dealing with this moment right now, that suggests an extraordinary kind of mental presence, maybe the ultimate form of detachment, right? Acting effectively without being crushed by what was or what will be.
And despite, or maybe because of how he handled all these hardships with that sense of responsibility and presence, our sources wrap up this section by listing how he's worshipped even today under so many names and so many places. Krishna Kanhaiya in Mathura, Jagannath in Odisha, Vithoba in Maharashtra, Srinath in Rajasthan, Dwarkadhish and Ranchod in Gujarat, Krishna in Udupi, Guru Veerappan in Kerala. The list goes on. And the notes conclude this thought powerfully. He and his life is truly an example for every human being. So this deep dive into our source material, it really paints this picture of someone just constantly facing huge challenges. From being teased as a kid to these epic wars, losing his city, the notes say he never really knew peace. Yet they emphasize this profound responsibility, this incredible detachment through it all.
Which brings us back to that central question, doesn't it? What does it actually mean for someone whose life is described here as not successful, as lacking miracles? What does it mean for that person to be revered as an example for all of us? How does living fully in the present moment, even when you supposedly know the past and future, how does that maybe redefine what success or purpose really looks like? Maybe something for you, the listener, to think about. What parts of this specific story, these details from the sources, what resonates most with the challenges or maybe the